The Galactic Council's grand chamber was designed to impress, with its crystalline dome revealing the swirling nebulae beyond and its acoustically perfect design ensuring every condescending comment could be heard with pristine clarity from any seat. Today marked Day 73 of the Human Integration Peace Accords, a fancy name for what was essentially an extended hazing ritual. Captain Eleanor Blackwood adjusted her uniform collar as she took her seat at the smallest delegation table. At 42, she had the dubious honor of representing the newest spacefaring species in a room full of civilizations who counted their histories in millennia rather than centuries. "Hank, remind me again why I shouldn't flip this ridiculous excuse for a table?" she muttered to her AI assistant. "Because, Captain," Hank's pleasantly neutral voice responded through her earpiece, "Earth cannot afford another diplomatic incident this fiscal quarter. Also, the table is bolted to the floor." Rhetorical question, Hank. Humor detected. Recalibrating. Ellie suppressed a smile. Humanity had developed authentic AI companions decades before joining the galactic community, another fact they'd strategically omitted from official records. Across the chamber, Ambassador Melix of the Zenturian Collective was pontificating about trade route allocations. The blue-skinned diplomat had what Ellie could only describe as a perpetual smirk etched into his face. As the Council's records clearly indicate, species with less than 1 century of faster-than-light capability cannot be granted access to the Orion Trade Corridor without proper supervision. The word supervision hung in the air like a bad smell. Chairperson Vrokthar, an imposing reptilian with ceremonial gold scales covering his natural green ones, nodded sagely. The Council appreciates the Zenturian Collective's generous offer to provide such supervision at the modest rate of only 40% commission on all human trade goods. 40%. Ellie hissed. That's highway robbery. Actually, Captain, Hank chimed in, the correct term would be spaceway robbery, as highways are predominantly a terrestrial. Not now, Hank. Ellie glanced at her data tablet, scrolling through the day's proposed compromises. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 40 years prior, after a Dralaxian scout ship crash-landed in the Mojave Desert. Earth had quickly proven they could adapt alien technologies and were ready for the stars. What they weren't ready for was the bureaucratic nightmare that was galactic politics. And finally, Vrokthar continued, regarding the human request for representation on the Technology Exchange Committee, the Council has determined that species still using... What was it? Yes, quantum computing are simply not advanced enough to contribute meaningfully. Several delegates tittered in what passed for laughter among their species. Instead, humans will be permitted to observe committee meetings from the adjoining viewing gallery, provided they maintain complete silence and submit any questions in writing 27 galactic standard days in advance. That was it. The final straw. Ellie felt something snap inside her, not in the dramatic, losing control way, but in the cold, calculated way that historically preceded humanity's most consequential decisions. She stood up. The chamber fell silent as Captain Blackwood rose from her seat. This wasn't in the protocol. Humans were supposed to sit quietly, accept the Council's generous terms, and be grateful for the opportunity to breathe the same recycled air as their galactic betters. Chairperson Vrokthar, Ellie said, her voice calm but carrying easily through the chamber. Before we continue, I'd like to address the Council regarding these proposals. Vroktar's inner eyelid flickered in annoyance. The human delegation was not scheduled to speak until next week's session, Captain Blackwood. I understand. I'll be brief. Several council members shuffled uncomfortably. The Araxian delegate whispered something to the Borellian representative, who made a sound suspiciously like a snort. Very well. The council recognizes the human delegation. You have 3 minutes. Vrokthar settled back, clearly expecting an awkward plea or stammering attempt at negotiation. Ellie walked to the central speaking platform, her boots clicking against the polished floor with military precision. Hank had discreetly activated the recording function on her comm device, standard procedure for all human representatives, though the Council didn't know that. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, she began, for 73 days I have sat at that insultingly small table, but listening to proposals that might have made sense when addressing primitive species, but not when addressing humanity. Ambassador Melix's smirk faltered slightly. The Council seems to labor under several misconceptions. First, that humanity is desperate to be accepted. Second, that we will tolerate any level of disrespect to achieve that acceptance. And third, perhaps most dangerously, that we have shown you all our cards. A confused murmur rippled through the chamber. The Zalaxian delegate leaned over to the Prontilian ambassador and whispered, "Cards? Is this a reference to their primitive gambling rituals?" In the brief 40 years since first contact, Ellie continued, humanity has been remarkably cooperative. We've accepted advisory status rather than full membership. We've shared our cultural and historical records. We've even allowed your xenoanthropologists to study our quaint little civilization. Her voice hardened just enough to make Vrok-Thar's scales ripple. What you've failed to understand about humanity is quite fundamental. Throughout our history, we've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own self-destructive tendencies. We've rebuilt from ashes more times than most of your species have reformed governments. We didn't get to the stars because things were easy. We got here because nothing, not physics, not biology, not our own catastrophic mistakes could stop us. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the typically fidgety Gormalians were still. So today, on behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I'm informing the Galactic Council that we are walking away from these negotiations until such time as the Council demonstrates a genuine interest in equitable relations. Melix finally found his voice. You can't simply walk out. The protocols. Watch me. Ellie turned to her small delegation of 3 junior diplomats who stood in perfect unison. Humanity respectfully withdraws from these proceedings, effective immediately. This is unprecedented. Vrok-Thar sputtered, gold scales flushing bronze in agitation. If you leave now, there will be consequences. Ellie paused at the chamber doors and looked back over her shoulder. I certainly hope so, Chairperson. I certainly hope so. As the human delegation exited, the chamber erupted into chaos. The Dralaxian representative, an elderly individual named Quiblix with skin that resembled cracked porcelain, watched thoughtfully as the doors closed behind the humans. They planned this, Quiblix said, to no one in particular. They've been planning this from the beginning. Next to him, a butterfly like Nerebian fluttered its wings nervously. They're bluffing. What can a single primitive species do against the United Council? Quiblix's ancient eyes narrowed. That, my colorful friend, is precisely what worries me. 1 week later, Commander Rex Thornton stood at the viewport of Proxima Centauri Station, watching the unusual stillness of the normally bustling spaceport. As Chief of Operations for humanity's busiest off-Earth commercial hub, he was accustomed to constant movement, ships docking and departing, cargo being loaded and unloaded, the organized chaos of interstellar commerce. Today, however, the massive docking bays sat empty, save for human vessels. Commander, his assistant called from a nearby console, the Zenturian trade envoy is demanding to speak with you again. Their medical supply shipment is 3 days overdue. Rex allowed himself a small smile. Tell them what we've told everyone else. Due to administrative reorganization following our withdrawal from Council negotiations, all non-emergency shipments are experiencing delays. They're claiming it is an emergency. Are they dying? No, but... What? Then it's not an emergency by our new definitions. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out with remarkable synchronicity. On Mars Colony, the largest exporter of rare medicinal compounds derived from genetically modified organisms that thrived in the red planet's soil, Production mysteriously slowed to a crawl. In the asteroid mining operations of the Jupiter system, equipment suddenly required extensive maintenance checks, reducing output by 80%. On the Council's central world of Voxivia, Ambassador Mielik stormed into an emergency meeting, his blue skin nearly purple with agitation. "This cannot be coincidence," he shouted, waving a data tablet. 17 critical shipments from human territories all delayed. 6 joint research projects suspended for safety reviews. Even their tourists are canceling reservations at our resorts. Chairperson Vrock Thar looked uncharacteristically disheveled, his ceremonial scales askew. The humans claim these are merely administrative issues following their exit from negotiations. "And you believe that?" Mielik scoffed. "Of course not," Vrock Thar snapped. "But there's nothing overtly hostile in their actions. They're following the letter of every trade agreement while somehow managing to bring everything to a standstill." A smaller alien with translucent skin that revealed the swirling patterns of its nervous system raised a tentacle. "Perhaps we underestimated their level of coordination?" "Impossible," Mielik said. "They've been spacefaring for less than half a century. They couldn't have integrated themselves so thoroughly into our supply chains." At that moment, a frantic aide burst into the chamber. "Chairperson, the Central Administrative AI is reporting critical failures in the neural link education system. All the teaching algorithms have suddenly reverted to basic function." "What does this have to do with humans?" Vrock Thar demanded. "The algorithms," the aide panted, "they were all developed by a subsidiary of something called Microsoft Google Apple, a human consortium." On the outer rim of Council space, Admiral Jyoti Patel sat in her modest office aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship Tenacity. At 65, she'd witnessed humanity's journey to the stars, from the early tentative steps to their current strategic withdrawal from Council negotiations. "Admiral," her executive officer announced, "we've received confirmation. Phase 1 is proceeding exactly as planned." Patel nodded, her silver-streaked hair catching the light. "And the Council's response?" "Confusion bordering on panic, ma'am. They're just beginning to realize how dependent they've become on human innovations." "Good." Patel studied the galactic map projected above her desk, watching as sectors normally illuminated with trade route indicators slowly dimmed. "Begin Phase 2. "This session of the Emergency Council is now in progress," Vrock Thar announced, his voice lacking its usual pompous formality. The chamber, normally meticulously organized by species and sector, now held a chaotic assemblage of anxious delegates. "The situation has deteriorated beyond acceptable parameters," he continued. "It has been 2 weeks since the human delegation's departure, and the disruptions have only intensified. Ambassador Greel of the Prontillian Confederation will present the economic impact assessment." A reed-thin alien with 4 arms and skin the color of burnished copper approached the central podium. "The numbers are troubling," Greel began, manipulating the holographic display with practiced precision. "Trade volume across the Council has decreased by 37%. Critical technology sectors are experiencing failures at an unprecedented rate. Most concerning of all, the quantum relay network is showing signs of degradation." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The QRN was the backbone of galactic communication, allowing near instantaneous contact across vast distances. "Impossible," shouted a bulky representative from the militant Kordaxian Empire. The QRN was developed by the Araxian technocracy thousands of years before humans emerged from their primordial ooze. The Araxian delegate, a normally reserved individual named Thelix, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "That is, not entirely accurate." The chamber fell silent. While the foundational principles were indeed Araxian, Thelix continued reluctantly, "We had reached a development plateau approximately 80 years ago. When we encountered humans and their unique approach to quantum entanglement theory, we borrowed some of their concepts without full attribution." "You stole their technology?" Vrokthar asked incredulously. We improved upon their primitive work, Felix insisted. But yes, certain key breakthroughs came from human research we acquired through our cultural exchange program. Before the council could fully process this revelation, the chamber doors slid open to admit Quiblix, the elderly Dralaxian who had watched the humans depart with such concern. Forgive my tardiness, Quiblix said, his voice carrying despite its age-worn rasp. I've been conducting my own investigation into our current predicament. What I've discovered may explain much. Quiblix shuffled to the central platform, his spotted hands manipulating the controls with surprising dexterity. The holographic display shifted to show a complex network of connections spanning the galaxy. This, he explained, is a map of human integration into our systems over the past 40 years. The red nodes represent critical infrastructure with human components or maintenance contracts. The blue lines show supply chains with human involvement. The display was a dense web of red and blue, covering nearly every sector of council space. This cannot be accurate, Melix protested. They're barely space-capable. That, Quiblix countered, is what they wanted us to believe. My sources indicate that humans had achieved rudimentary faster-than-light travel nearly a decade before our official first contact. They were studying us before we ever knew they existed. From her command center at the Jupiter Defense Platform, Admiral Patel watched the Council's emergency session through a secure feed. Earth's intelligence network had long ago compromised the Council's impenetrable communications system, another fact carefully omitted from official records. They're finally starting to get it, she remarked to her staff. Activate the Proxima Protocol. Across Council space, human-made components in thousands of critical systems simultaneously entered diagnostic mode, reducing functionality by 60% while remaining technically operational. Life support and safety systems remained untouched. Humanity wasn't monstrous, but everything from food replication to waste processing slowed to a crawling pace. Back in the council chamber, alarms began blaring as reports flooded in from hundreds of worlds. What is happening? Vrokthar demanded as his personal communicator erupted with urgent messages. Quiblix gestured toward the display, which now pulsed ominously with thousands of warning indicators. The humans call it showing their hand. I believe we have gravely miscalculated. Day 17 of the crisis, Vrokthar dictated into his personal log, his once immaculate office now cluttered with emergency reports and half-eaten meal containers. The Council has made 26 attempts to contact Earth's government. All have been met with the same automated response: your message is important to us. Due to high communication volume, responses may be delayed. For immediate assistance with life-threatening emergencies, please use the designated humanitarian channels. He slumped back in his chair, feeling every one of his 287 years. A soft chime announced a visitor. Enter, he called wearily. Quiblix shuffled in, looking grimmer than usual. The Kordaxians have withdrawn from the Council, he announced without preamble. They're attempting to negotiate separately with the humans. Preposterous. The Council has stood united for 12,000 years. Yes, Quiblix agreed, until we encountered a species that doesn't play by our rules. The Zenturians are threatening to follow suit if we don't resolve this within 3 days. Vrokthar's scales dulled in distress. Has there been any progress in restoring our systems to full functionality? Our best technicians are baffled. The human components appear to be functioning normally by their own metrics, yet nothing works at capacity. It's as if they built everything with an intentional choke point that only they can release. In a secure bunker deep beneath Luna Colony, Captain Eleanor Blackwood watched the mounting panic with mixed emotions. The plan was working perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. Hank, give me the latest impact assessment, she requested. Council space is experiencing significant disruption, Hank reported. Essential services remain operational, but severely limited. No casualties reported, but considerable discomfort and economic damage. 17 separate diplomatic overtures received in the past 6 hours alone. Ellie nodded. And our contingency systems? All human worlds and colonies are operating at normal capacity. The redundancy networks we established are functioning as designed. For decades, humanity had been building parallel systems for themselves while creating subtle dependencies for the Council species. It wasn't malicious, merely strategic. Like a chess player thinking several moves ahead, Earth had prepared for this moment from their first contact. On Voxivia, the Council's central world, citizens were experiencing the first resource shortages in living memory. Food synthesizers produced only basic nutrition packs instead of customized cuisines. Entertainment networks broadcast only archived content. Public transportation ran at minimum capacity. For species accustomed to effortless abundance, these minor inconveniences felt apocalyptic. The Drexians are reporting civil unrest, reported Melix, who had reluctantly joined forces with Thar to manage the crisis. Their atmospheric processors are operating at minimal capacity. Are there people in danger? Thar asked sharply. No, but their air is unscented. Thar blinked. Unscented? Drexians modify their atmospheric composition for seasonal celebrations. Apparently, they're missing their traditional Harmony Festival aromas, and the population is most displeased. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Thar. The mighty Galactic Council, backbone of civilization for millennia, was being brought to its knees not through warfare or aggression, but through the sudden absence of conveniences they hadn't even realized were human-provided. We have no choice, he finally admitted. Prepare a formal request for renewed negotiations. Grant all the concessions the humans initially requested. Add whatever else you think might entice them back to the table. Melix's blue skin paled. All of them? But that would mean full council membership, equal trade rights, technology exchange privileges. Yes, all of it. Thar's inner eyelid flickered rapidly, the reptilian equivalent of a nervous twitch, before the Kordaxians convinced them to demand even more. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so full. Representatives from every member species crowded the viewing galleries, while the main floor had been rearranged to accommodate a much larger human delegation at a proper-sized table. Captain Eleanor Blackwood entered with Admiral Patel and 10 other human representatives, their expressions professionally neutral despite the palpable tension in the room. The Council recognizes the delegation from Earth and her colonies, Thar announced, his ceremonial scales polished to a desperate shine. We welcome you back to these chambers and express our sincere desire for mutual cooperation moving forward. Ellie took her seat at the head of the human delegation, Hank's interface glowing softly beside her. The people of Earth appreciate the Council's invitation and look forward to productive discussions. The negotiations that followed were remarkably brief. With the Council's leverage effectively eliminated, the terms were less a negotiation and more a cordial agreement to humanity's pre-prepared conditions. Full membership rights, equal standing on all committees, fair trade access across Council space, a comprehensive review of technology attribution and appropriate compensation for human innovations that had been borrowed over the years. By the session's end, humanity had achieved in 3 hours what might otherwise have taken decades of conventional diplomacy. As the formal proceedings concluded, Quiblix approached Ellie with a respectful nod. Masterfully played, Captain Blackwood. I find myself curious, was this outcome your intention from the beginning? Ellie allowed herself a small smile. Let's just say we came prepared for various scenarios. And the system's disruptions? Will they be resolved now that agreements have been reached? Most are already returning to normal operations, she confirmed. The remainder will be at full capacity within 24 hours. Quiblix's aged eyes crinkled with what might have been amusement. I would very much like to visit your Earth someday. You are a fascinating species. "You'd be welcome any time, Representative Quiblix." Later, as the human delegation prepared to depart for their new, permanent offices within the council complex, Ellie found a moment alone with Hank. "Well, that went better than expected," she observed. "Indeed, Captain. Though I calculate a 78.4% probability that several council members will attempt to circumvent these agreements within the next standard year." Ellie laughed. "Oh, I'm counting on it, Hank. That's why we only revealed Phase 1 and 2 of our contingency plans. Phase 3 remains classified, I presume?" "Absolutely. After all, the best negotiations are the ones where you keep something in reserve." She glanced around the opulent council chamber that would now include humanity as equals. "Besides, we're still new at this whole galactic politics thing. We should leave ourselves room to grow." Across the galaxy, systems gradually returned to normal operation. Trade resumed. The brief crisis faded into memory, though its lessons remained painfully clear. The species that had been dismissed as primitive newcomers had proven themselves sophisticated strategists capable of bringing the mighty council to its knees without firing a single shot. Meanwhile, in a nondescript office on Earth, a small team began drafting plans for something called Diplomatic Contingency Phase 4, just in case the Council needed another reminder about respecting humanity in the future. After all, as humans had known for millennia, the best way to maintain peace was to be extraordinarily well prepared for its absence. The temperature in the Galactic Council had indeed dropped when humanity walked out, but the frost had settled firmly on the Council's side of the negotiating table.